For years, the official story was that he just walked away. But the real reason WWE erased one of its biggest legends from history is far darker than you've been told. This is the story of the moments the wrestling world wants you to forget about Macho Man Randy Savage. He was a bolt of lightning in a world of ordinary men, a psychedelic explosion of color, fringe, and a voice that sounded like it gargled gravel and gasoline. Macho Man Randy Savage wasn't just a wrestler, he was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. From the top rope to the Slim Jim commercials, his intensity was electric. His charisma was undeniable. He was a two-time WWF World Heavyweight Champion, a man who redefined the Intercontinental Championship, and one half of the most powerful force in the universe, the Mega Powers. For a whole generation of fans, he felt just as big, if not bigger, than Hulk Hogan. His matches were masterpieces, his promos were gospel, and his presence defined an entire era. Then one day, he was gone. He vanished from WWF television in 1994, not with a bang, but a quiet, confusing exit. For the next decade and a half, it was almost as if he never existed. The company he helped turn into a global empire seemed to do everything it could to write him out of its own history. His name was rarely spoken, his matches were mysteriously missing from compilations, and his face was gone from video games. It was a corporate ghosting of one of their most important figures, a blacklisting that baffled fans and fueled whispers for years. The official story was a simple business disagreement, a wrestler who wanted to keep wrestling, and a promoter who wanted him to hang up his boots. But in the world of professional wrestling, the simplest explanation is rarely the whole truth. Behind the curtain, a much darker, more complicated story started to form. A story of a broken promise, a deep personal betrayal, and a career-ending rumor so toxic the company wants it buried forever. So what really happened between Randy Savage and Vince McMahon? Why did the chairman of the WWF hold a grudge so deep that it lasted until Savage's tragic, untimely death? It's time to dig into the madness and uncover the moments WWE has been hiding about the Macho Man. Before we dig into the madness, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story from wrestling's hidden history. And let us know in the comments below, what's your all-time favorite Macho Man promo? Chapter 1. The Legend of the Macho Man. Before the silence, there was the noise. A beautiful, chaotic, and completely captivating noise that was the career of Randy Savage. To understand why his exile was so shocking, you first have to understand just how high he flew. He wasn't just another guy off Vince McMahon's star-making assembly line. He was a self-made force of nature who commanded the spotlight long before he ever set foot in a WWF ring. Born Randy Poffo, son of wrestler Angelo Poffo, wrestling was in his DNA. After a short career in minor league baseball, he came back to the family business, but he refused to ride his father's coattails. He built a character from his own manic energy and a terrifying level of perfectionism. The name Savage came from Booker Ole Anderson, who saw something untamed in his style. But Macho Man? That was a suggestion from his mother, Judy Poffo. His brother, Lanny Poffo, suggested he cap it all off with the, "Ooh, yeah." He borrowed from wrestling wildman Pampero Firpo. With that, a legend was born. When he arrived in the WWF in 1985, he was the total package, but a package unlike any other. He wasn't a smiling, all-American hero. He was paranoid, unpredictable, and wildly flamboyant. His interviews were the stuff of legend, stream of consciousness rants delivered with a wide-eyed intensity that felt alarmingly real. His brother Lanny later revealed that Randy used to have a crippling fear of public speaking. To beat it, he developed that unique cadence and his signature growl, turning a weakness into one of his greatest strengths. His work in the ring was just as revolutionary. While a lot of heavyweights at the time were slow, lumbering brawlers, Savage moved like an aerial artist. He was fast, agile, and his matches were laid out with a frantic precision that was years ahead of its time. He treated every single performance, whether it was at WrestleMania or in a small-town arena, with that same obsessive dedication. His pursuit of the perfect match was relentless. And then there was Miss Elizabeth. In an age of over-the-top cartoons, Elizabeth Hewlett was a picture of pure grace and elegance. She was his real-life wife, and their on-screen story mesmerized the world. Savage was the possessive, jealous monster, and Elizabeth was the beautiful, timid damsel caught in the crossfire. Their story was the beating heart of the WWF for years. When he won the WWF Championship in a grueling one-night tournament at WrestleMania 4, the image of him hoisting Elizabeth onto his shoulder in celebration became one of the most iconic in wrestling history. His feud with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat over the Intercontinental Championship is still held up as the gold standard for modern wrestling. Their match at WrestleMania 3 completely stole the show from the main event of Hogan versus Andre the Giant. It was a masterpiece of storytelling and athletics that brought a level of prestige to the Intercontinental title it had never had before. Savage's incredible performances during his reign are why many still consider him the greatest Intercontinental champion to ever hold the belt. The peak of his career came with the rise and fall of the Mega Powers. Teaming up with his rival Hulk Hogan, they were the two biggest stars in the universe, an unstoppable force. But Savage's character was never meant to be a sidekick. The slow-burn storyline of his simmering jealousy, his paranoia that Hogan was trying to steal Elizabeth, was a thriller that finally exploded at WrestleMania 5. In a match that felt as real as any championship fight, Savage's year-long reign as WWF champion ended at Hogan's hands. The story was so powerful because it tapped into the very real intensity that defined Randy Savage. He wasn't playing a character, he was the character. Even after that loss, his star didn't fade. He reinvented himself as the Macho King, complete with a crown and scepter, and started a new reign of terror. He eventually lost a retirement match to the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 7, which led to a tearful reunion with Elizabeth, one of the most emotional moments in WWF history. It was supposed to be the end of his time in the ring, but Randy Savage wasn't ready to stop wrestling. He wasn't built that way. And that relentless drive, that refusal to be put on a shelf, would become the first crack in his relationship with Vince McMahon. Chapter 2. The Turning Point. A King Without a Kingdom. The reunion with Miss Elizabeth at WrestleMania 7 felt like a storybook ending. After a career fueled by rage and paranoia, the Macho Man had found peace, defeated by a worthy opponent and back with his one true love. The WWF moved him from the ring to the commentary booth, setting him up as a veteran voice for a new generation. Sitting right next to Vince McMahon on Monday Night Raw, he was still one of the most popular faces in the company. But for a man whose whole identity was forged in combat, the announcer's desk felt like a cage. By 1993 and 1994, the WWF was changing fast. The rock and wrestling era was over, and Vince McMahon was all in on the new generation. Guys like Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper were being phased out for younger, more athletic talents, like Bret the Hitman Hart and Shawn Michaels. At 40 years old, Randy Savage was seen by management as a relic of that past era, a decorated king whose kingdom was being given away to new princes. The problem was, Randy Savage didn't see himself as a relic. He saw a performer who was still in his prime. And he wasn't wrong. He was in incredible shape and believed he had years of main event matches left. That retirement at WrestleMania 7, in his mind, that was just a storyline, not a career death sentence. He had already proven he could still go, returning to the ring to win his second WWF Championship from Ric Flair at WrestleMania 8. But after that title run, he was pushed right back to the commentary desk. The message from Vince was loud and clear. Your time as a top guy is over. This creative frustration started to eat away at him. He was stuck watching a new generation of stars get the opportunities he still wanted. He reportedly pitched a brilliant, long-term storyline to Vince McMahon, a classic veteran vs upstart feud with the brash and talented Shawn Michaels. The idea was for Savage to spend a year building up to a final match at WrestleMania, where he would pass the torch and put the younger star over, giving his own in-ring career the grand finale it deserved. It was a perfect piece of booking. Vince McMahon shot him down. To Vince, the future was now, and Savage was the past. He was focused on his new roster and didn't see the point in giving a major WrestleMania spot to a star he considered retired. For Savage, this wasn't just business. It felt personal. It was like being told his talent, his drawing power, and his loyalty didn't matter anymore. He was being asked to fade away gracefully, something that went against every fiber of his being. Years later, in a 2000 interview, Savage explained it himself. "They wanted me to do the commentary thing, which I will want to do someday, but I just wasn't ready to take off my boots at that point. It wasn't anything but an attitude, or a direction, which the WWF was going. It didn't work for me at that time. The tension was getting thick." On commentary, Vince and Randy kept up a friendly act, but behind the scenes, the relationship was fracturing. Savage felt disrespected. Vince saw Savage as someone who was fighting the company's new direction. And all the while down south, a rival promotion was making big moves. World Championship Wrestling, with Ted Turner's deep pockets, was recruiting former WWF stars, offering them big money and the one thing Randy Savage wanted most, a spot back in the main event. The stage was set for a split, but nobody could have guessed just how personal and how permanent the fallout would be. Vince wanted a new generation, but Savage felt he was still in his prime. Who was right? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments, and if you're fascinated by this story so far, do us a favor and snap into that like and subscribe button. Chapter 3: The Broken Promise, the Official Story. By late 1994, Vince McMahon was a man under siege. The federal government was hitting him with a steroid distribution case that threatened to destroy his empire and send him to prison. His biggest star, Hulk Hogan, had already jumped ship to the competition, WCW, and the Monday Night War was about to begin. Vince needed loyalty, he needed stability, and he thought he had it from one of his most trusted veterans, Randy Savage. As Savage's WWF contract was about to expire at the end of October 1994, the talks about his future got serious. The most common and official version of the story, the one told by insiders for years, is all about a handshake and a broken promise. According to this story, Vince McMahon, terrified of another major star leaving, sat down with Savage. He laid out his plan for Savage's future, a lifetime role as an ambassador and broadcaster, a secure and respected job for a legend. In return, Savage supposedly gave Vince his word. He promised he wouldn't follow Hogan to WCW. He would stay loyal to the WWF. For Vince McMahon, who built his business on personal relationships and handshake deals, that promise was everything. He took Savage at his word and thought the deal was done. Just a few weeks later, Vince was completely blindsided. Randy Savage, the man he thought was his friend, had signed a multi-million-dollar contract with World Championship Wrestling. The betrayal in Vince's eyes was absolute. On the November 7th, 1994, episode of Monday Night Raw, a visibly hurt Vince McMahon did something totally unprecedented. He went on air and announced Savage's departure, wishing him well in a way that was dripping with disappointment. Jeff Jarrett, who was in the WWF at the time, remembered the shock in the locker room. He said Vince was obsessed with his new generation and cutting ties with the past. But losing Savage, a personal friend, was an emotional deal. This wasn't just about losing another wrestler. This was personal. For years, McMahon and Savage had worked side by side at the commentary desk. To Vince, Savage wasn't just an employee, he was practically family. And to be lied to, in his mind, was the ultimate sin. The betrayal was made even worse by a huge financial hit. In the early 90s, Randy Savage had become the iconic face of Slim Jim. His "snap into a Slim Jim" catchphrase was everywhere. When Savage jumped to WCW, the multi-million-dollar sponsorship deal with Slim Jim went right along with him. At a time when Vince was fighting for his freedom and his company's survival, losing a major advertiser was a devastating blow. It was salt in a very deep wound. The loss of a friend was now tangled up with the loss of millions, creating a perfect storm of resentment. This story of a broken promise became the accepted reason for Savage's 2-decade-long blacklisting. While other guys who left, like Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall, were eventually welcomed back, Savage remained an outcast. Vince McMahon, a guy famous for saying he'd do business with the devil himself if it was best for business, drew a hard line with the Macho Man. Insiders like former executive John Laurinaitis remembered trying to pitch a Randy Savage DVD, only for Vince to stare into the distance and refuse to even talk about it. This was the official story. It made sense. Savage betrayed Vince at the worst possible time, costing him a friend and a fortune. It was a clean, understandable reason for an unprecedented grudge. But for a lot of people, it never felt like the whole story. The bitterness seemed too deep, too personal, too unbreakable. As the years dragged on, whispers of a much darker, unspoken reason began to circulate. A rumor so damning that it would explain why the most forgiving man in wrestling could never forgive Randy Savage. Chapter 4. The Unspoken Rumor. The Story WW. Once buried in the shadows of the wrestling world, where backstage gossip hardens into legend, there's another story about Randy Savage's exile. It's a story that has never been confirmed, one that WWE has never addressed, and one so explosive it's often called the darkest urban legend in the industry. For years, the official narrative of a broken promise and a lost sponsorship was enough. But the sheer length and coldness of the blacklisting made many believe that something far worse, something truly unforgivable, must have happened. The rumor, which started festering on early internet wrestling forums, alleges that Randy Savage had an inappropriate relationship with Vince McMahon's daughter, Stephanie McMahon. The details have shifted over the years, but the core allegation is always the same. It claims that in the early 1990s, around 1993 or 1994, Savage, then in his early 40s, became involved with a teenage Stephanie. At the time Savage left the WWF in late 1994, Stephanie would have been 18 years old. Some versions of the story, however, allege the relationship started when she was 17. While a relationship might have been technically legal depending on the state's age of consent, the idea of a top star being involved with his boss's teenage daughter was, and still is, a nuclear concept. This rumor, born in the dark corners of the internet, gained traction for one simple reason. It provided a motive that fit the punishment. Vince McMahon was known for forgiving almost anything if it was good for business. He forgave Hulk Hogan for testifying against him. He forgave Bret Hart after the Montreal Screwjob. He even forgave the Ultimate Warrior after years of public feuds and a DVD called The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior. Yet Randy Savage remained unforgiven. If the rumor were true, it would explain a grudge that went way beyond business. It would be a father's rage, a wound that could never be healed by money or fan demand. In the decades since, no real evidence has ever come out. No one directly involved has ever confirmed it. The McMahons have kept a wall of total silence, refusing to even acknowledge the rumor's existence. And tragically, Savage is no longer with us to give his side of the story. Still, the rumor has survived, fueled by bits of circumstantial chatter and cryptic comments from people who were there. Wrestlers from that time have often danced around the topic. Dutch Mantel has said that the rumor was accepted as fact backstage, whether it was true or not. These aren't confirmations, but they add layers to the myth, suggesting that something about their dynamic was noticed by their peers. Perhaps the most puzzling comments have come from those closest to Savage. His own brother, Lanny Poffo, always denied the rumor, but sometimes in a strange way. On his podcast, he once said, "I have absolutely no idea if the urban legend is true. If it were true, I wouldn't tell you because it's nobody else's business." It's a denial that leaves just enough room for speculation to keep flowing. Even more interesting are the vague claims from Stephanie Bellers, Savage's girlfriend in WCW, known as Gorgeous George. In interviews, she has hinted at the rumor, claiming Savage told her what really happened one night, and then regretted telling her the next day. These statements are far from a smoking gun, but they've been grabbed by believers as evidence of Savage's character. If not the specific event itself, the rumor remains just that, a rumor, an unsolvable mystery. Longtime WWE executive Bruce Pritchard has said he believes it's untrue and that there were always business talks about bringing Savage back that just never worked out. But for a fan base desperate to understand why one of their heroes was cast out for so long, the Stephanie McMahon story became the missing piece of the puzzle. It's a narrative that paints Vince not as a cold businessman, but as a protective father, and Randy Savage not as a disgruntled employee, but as a man who committed the one unforgivable sin. True or not, the rumor has become a permanent part of the Macho Man's legacy, a dark shadow that explains the long silence that followed the madness. Chapter 5. Life in Exile and a Legacy Redefined. When Randy Savage showed up in World Championship Wrestling in December 1994, it was a statement. He was proving to Vince McMahon and the world that he was far from finished. He immediately jumped into feuds with Ric Flair and reunited with Hulk Hogan, showing he was still a major star. For the next 5 years, he was a main event attraction for WCW, winning their World Heavyweight Championship 4 times. His time in WCW was a validation of everything he believed, that he still had plenty left in the tank. He was a key player in the Monday Night War, a time when WCW was consistently beating the WWF in the ratings, with Savage's appearances often causing huge viewership spikes. His run in WCW was wild, marked by classic feuds with guys like Diamond Dallas Page and his involvement in the NWO. But as WCW started to fall apart from its own bad decisions in the late 90s, Savage's role got smaller. He wrestled his last match for the company in 2000, and as the new century began, he mostly disappeared from the wrestling world. He popped up again in 2003, not in a ring, but in a recording studio. He released a rap album called Be a Man, with the title track being a diss record aimed at Hulk Hogan. It was a bizarre chapter in his career, seen by many as a strange and slightly sad attempt to stay relevant. He had one final, very brief wrestling appearance in TNA in late 2004, but it didn't last. After that, the Macho Man truly retired, stepping away from the business that had defined his entire life. Throughout all this, WWE's silence on Savage was deafening. As they started producing DVDs and TV specials about their own history, Savage was often glaringly absent. His legendary matches were passed over, and for a long time, he wasn't included in major WWE video games, a clear sign of his blacklisted status. This quiet erasure only added more fuel to the rumors about why he and Vince really fell out. Behind the flamboyant character was a man known for being intense and sometimes volatile. His real-life confrontations were the stuff of legend. He was fiercely private and intensely protective of Miss Elizabeth, a trait that often blurred the lines between his on-screen character and his real-life personality. His complicated up-and-down friendship with Hulk Hogan was well known, a mix of professional rivalry and personal issues that lasted for decades until they reportedly made peace shortly before Savage's death. This difficult personality probably didn't help him during his exile. He wasn't the kind of guy to reach out and mend fences. For years, it looked like that's how the story would end, with one of wrestling's greatest icons forever estranged from the company he helped build. Fans begged for his induction into the WWE Hall of Fame, but year after year, he was overlooked. Vince McMahon's grudge, whatever its real source, seemed unbreakable. Then on May 20th, 2011, tragedy struck. Randy Poffo, the man the world knew as Randy Savage, suffered a sudden heart attack while driving his car in Seminole, Florida. He was 58 years old. The wrestling world was in shock. Tributes poured in from friends, rivals, and a generation of fans who grew up idolizing him. The massive outpouring of grief and respect was a testament to the mark he had left on everyone. His death seemed to finally melt the ice around Vince McMahon's heart. In the years that followed, WWE slowly began to bring Savage back into its official history. He was featured in video games and on the WWE Network. Then finally, in 2015, the inevitable happened. Macho Man Randy Savage was announced as an inductee into the WWE Hall of Fame. The induction ceremony was bittersweet. His brother Lanny Poffo accepted the honor on his behalf. Lanny revealed that Randy had always wanted to be inducted with his father and brother as the Poffo family. But Lanny decided to accept the individual honor for Randy, saying that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, and that the fans deserved to see him take his rightful place among the immortals. Hulk Hogan, his greatest rival, gave the induction speech, speaking of his friend and the madness they created together. The hatchet, it seemed, was finally buried. But the questions still linger. Was the two-decade exile of Randy Savage really just about a broken promise and a lost sponsorship? Or was it rooted in a darker, more personal betrayal that a father could never forgive? With Savage gone and the McMahon family silent, we will probably never know the whole truth. The Stephanie McMahon rumor remains the great, unproven mystery of modern wrestling, a piece of folklore that perfectly explains the seemingly inexplicable. What we know for sure is Randy Savage's legacy. He was a true original, a once-in-a-lifetime performer whose influence is still felt today. He was a master of his craft, a brilliant storyteller, and an athlete whose intensity burned right through the television screen. He brought a new level of credibility to every championship he held and created moments that are forever burned into the memories of wrestling fans. Despite the years of being ignored, despite the controversies and the whispers, his legacy proved too big to be erased. He is a tragic hero, a king who was sent into exile, and a legend whose complicated story makes him one of the most fascinating figures in wrestling history. The madness in the end gave way to immortality. Oh, yeah.